Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden. I'm a little dirty. I've been working out here and getting the vegetable garden going. This morning as we are approaching our last frost, I thought we may have had our last frost, but there are some days in the next weekend that currently says 31 degrees, so it'll probably change. It changed since yesterday, but I'm keeping an eye on it daily before I plant any of my tender annuals. Today I'm going to be showing you how I set some of this irrigation up for these raised beds. We're going to be talking a little bit about Coast of Maine soils because I used them a couple years ago when I was starting my last vegetable garden, and I had the most beautiful and successful garden that year. They have really great soils. And then we're going to be planting up some strawberries and blueberries. And I'll show you a blackberry that I think is interesting. So these are metal raised garden beds. I've grown in them for several years now, probably 4 or 5 years. And I found a lot of success with them. So I've purchased all of them previously. And so when I went to designing this vegetable garden space, I decided just to go with what I've known and what worked really well for me. I will tell you that a lot of the brands are virtually the same. So select a brand based on maybe the accessories that they have, because that's a really good indicator of how they're developing things. I did fill these with 2/3 of the way of a wood chip mix that's been sitting in my backyard back here for 6 to 8 months. So they started to break down quite a bit over winter, and then to simply cut down on the amount of soil I needed. So the top third, at least a good foot, will be this really great raised bed mix from Coast of Maine. So a couple years ago, I did a video where I used their compost, both their lobster and crab compost and their cow manure compost, and I had the best vegetable garden that year. And then I discovered that they had this raised bed mix, and it actually incorporates the compost that I used in the last vegetable garden, and also has kelp meal, worm castings, and mycorrhiza. So it's really everything you need to get your vegetable garden going. Now, what I like about Coast of Maine soils is they are OMRI listed, and so when I'm growing vegetables for my home, I'm always trying to focus on growing organic vegetables because those are expensive at the grocery store, and I really, since I wasn't able to get to this project last year, really wanted to get in some good vegetables that I can eat on this year. Today we're going to be focusing on some perennial vegetables. So last year I purchased this Taste of Heaven Blackberry from Great Garden Plants. I transplanted it into this bed earlier this morning, and I've kind of trained it along this trellis, which I think was cute. I've had it for a while. And then Great Garden Plants sent me out a couple blueberries from the Proven Winners program. So we've got Splendid Blue. These are really nice. I've actually wanted to incorporate some of these into the landscape because they make great landscape shrubs, but because blueberries like a little more acidic conditions, and I'll probably be adding some soil acidifier to this bed to make them happier, they may not do so well in our native soil. So I always grow my blueberries in Southwest Ohio in raised beds or containers. The second one is Skydew Gold, and it has gold leaves on it, so it's a nice contrast here. So we got the gold, the blue, and they're going to be on the back here of the bed. They'll get pretty large, 3 to 4 foot tall and wide, so it should fill this whole space nicely. And then Great Garden Plants sent out a few strawberries, and these are the 𝗣𝗢𝗄𝗏 variety, and actually one came with a little strawberry on it earlier this week, so I might eat this as a snack after we're done. But I really just like pink strawberry blooms. And I'm going to put these, I'm going to open this bag of soil. We'll look at the back of the bag first to look over some of the other informational things in there. And that way the berries will be a little higher and hang off the side so I can get at them easily, and they won't be so dirty sitting on the soil, so I can snack directly in the garden. Now let's talk a little bit about how I irrigate my raised garden beds. I have used drip irrigation for years, and I carry that over from the landscape also to my raised garden beds. In the last raised garden beds I set up at my last home, I used these Rainbird 1/4 inch drip manifolds, which I found to work really well. So you'll see I actually just come through this morning and did this, and I need to come through and landscape staple it down and clean it up. But my drip irrigation runs from the water source all the way down there. Each bed connects to it underneath. So you can see here, since I use these metal raised garden beds, I put a PVC pipe underneath them so they don't injure the actual drip irrigation tubing. And then I teed off everywhere all the way down to each bed. Eventually there's a 90 that brings the drip irrigation up to the side of the raised bed, and then it goes in a 1/2 inch tubing to right here and 90s back up to this manifold. That allows me to kind of put this manifold wherever I wanted to in the bed, and I like to have easy access, so I kind of put it on the front of each bed. You can see there and the front of each bed down there. So I like these drip irrigation manifolds because there's 9 individual ports on each manifold. So it comes up in a 1/2 inch drip tubing, and you can individually shut off any 1/4 inch line. So right now I have 5 lines in the bed. Let's show you that. So you can see I have 5 lines here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then each little 1/4 inch drip connects there, and you can shut on and off any individual line by twisting these back and forth. Now these work really well because if you don't have something planted in a bed, then, or a part of the bed, then you can shut off any one line, so you're not just watering soil with no plants in it. And so I'm going to fill this up with perennial things. I think I'm going to put some Egyptian walking onions here because I really like to use those as green onions in recipes. But today we're just going to be starting planting off these few things I have in here. So let me set the camera down and we'll go over a few more things. So let's take a look at this soil on the back here. So on the back it tells you everything that you need to know about this raised bed mix, including its ingredient composition here. So you'll notice on the back here the guaranteed analysis, just like you would see on a fertilizer supplement. You can see the ingredients in here, and it even has and contains some biochar, which is really interesting and will help improve the soil and retain moisture. So I'm going to open this last bag of it, and you can see the texture of this. It really is just like chocolate cake, which is really nice. You don't really want to cover your drip irrigation so much. I had just laid it down here previously, so I'm going to pull it back up to the surface. That way I can put it along an emitter where each plant is. So there's an emitter right about here on this drip irrigation, so I'm going to put my strawberry there next to that, and that way when I run my drip irrigation, it will get watered perfectly. These emitters are spaced, I think, roughly every 9 inches on this 1/4 inch drip irrigation, which seems to work well for me for the vegetable garden. You can also use the 6 inch emitter spacing if you're planting a lot of things really tightly together, or a lot of small perennials or annuals, but I found that the 9 works pretty well, honestly. There we go. Now, Great Garden Plants is where I go to get a lot of my smaller shrubs that I purchase for the garden that are hard to find. But they also carry edible plants, as I mentioned. So they've got, I purchased this Taste of Heaven Black Beauty or Blackberry last year. And I also, down here on the ground, I'm not sure if you can see it in the photo, I purchased some 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓. I think they're called 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 or something similar. I'm probably butchering that name, a couple years ago. And I actually liked them so much, and they were hard to find because they're similar to like a blueberry. They taste similar to like a blueberry, and they have a really tropical flavor. And I dug them up at my last house and brought them with me here and planted them in the ground from where I knew the vegetable garden would be. And they've actually done quite well. So I also want to introduce you to these little onions. So these are called walking onions. I purchased them probably about 4 years ago, and I did a video on them about 4 years ago. But they're interesting. Now, I brought these from my last house. They produce these bulblets on the top of the onion stalks, and then you can eat those as tiny little onions, or you can plant them. Now, these have been sitting in this container since I moved to this property 1.5 years ago, and most are dried out. But there are some in here that still have some life to them. So I'm going to plant those and hope that I get them to come up. Now, Egyptian walking onions are interesting because you can eat the stalk itself as like a green onion, you can eat the bulb itself as like a regular onion, and then the bulblets that it produces up top you can eat as well. If you leave them, those bulblets tend to fall over, and then they root and grow and produce another onion, which is how they got their name, walking onions. So I'm going to go through here and pick out some of the best ones that I see, and then I'm going to just put these in the ground. But you can see some of these bulblets can actually get pretty big. They won't produce bulblets their first year. So these that are planted, if they grow, will produce bulblets next year. It just takes them a little while to get going. But I'm excited to have these back in the garden because they're a really great alternative to green onions, and they're perennial. So something I do every year, so Coast of Maine soil is really great. It has that nice chocolatey texture. It has the macronutrients, NPK, and a couple other things, but I always like to add some micronutrients from Azomite. Now, Azomite is a rock dust. Be very careful when you're putting it on so you're not breathing in the rock dust into your lungs. You can wear a mask if you need to protect yourself, but I always just scatter a little bit on top of the soil and work it in with my hands each year. It seems to do great things for the vegetable garden too. It's made from volcanic ash. As it rains, this will work itself into the soil, break down more, and become accessible to the plants. So thank you for Coast of Maine for providing the raised bed mix for these beds this year, and Great Garden Plants for sending out some perennial vegetable fruit plants for me to graze on during the warm summer months. Now, I would have loved to have been able to fill these beds with entirely soil. That is my preferred method, and I did that at my last garden. I have tried the 𝗩𝗥𝗢𝗗𝗢 method before, where you add stumps and debris and stuff, and I have not found that method to work very well for me. I had really poor results several years ago when I started that method and used some different varieties of soil. I'm hoping that I have enough soil in here, a good column of soil to grow plants in, and as the wood chips break down, since they had already started breaking down, they'll form a nice soil underneath as well. As those wood chips break down, I'll have to continue adding some more Coast of Maine soil onto these beds over the next several years, but that's pretty common practice with any vegetable garden, so that's just something to look forward to in the future years, and you always kind of want to recharge your soils each year anyway. So next year I may add some more Coast of Maine raised bed mix, or I may separately purchase that cow manure and lobster and crab compost that they have, because it's really good in what I used at my last garden. But either way, expect to be recharging the nutrients in your vegetable garden bed each spring before you start growing. So for the rest of these beds over the next several weeks, I'm going to start planting out some annuals. I've got tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers. I'm going to probably do some small melons. The typical things that I plant in my vegetable garden. Kale, I really love kale, and lettuces, Swiss chard for salads. I just want to be able to come out here and cut stuff to eat a nice lunch with during the summer when it's really hot. So we'll get started on that process in a couple weeks as I keep an eye on the weather to make sure we're not going to have any frosts. Thank y'all for joining me for this video, and remember, be a light. Stick around.